We have to look at things a little bit differently. So in order to do that, we want to frame where we come from in wellness. Start having an honest dialogue about this, right? It came from the DM space. We are part of, as are you, an evolution, and reform is driving a much faster clip of that. So we want to talk about what are the implications to you, but how do we have to look at this thing differently and get honest with ourselves about what we are trying to accomplish, and are we actually driving towards those objectives, right? Then we're going to have some fun and launch what we consider to be, and I think you will too, some game-changing academic partnerships. We want to look at the problem pragmatically. We want to look at it objectively through your lens. What are the claims in the industry? Are we winning? Are we losing? Is it good money that we're spending on these programs? And given what we'll talk about in terms of what we're going to be spending on wellness in the near term, we've got to get honest about what the outcomes are and are they driving towards your objectives. What is the denominator in your equation? Meaning, what do you consider victory? Is it culture? Great. Is it financial? Great. But we have got to design the programs to not only articulate those objectives, but let's not have the vendor selection up front. Let's put that towards the end. By the way, we're going to talk a lot about where we've come from, and it sounds a little bit like maybe we're making fun of the vendors. We're not. This is an evolution. The programs have changed dramatically over time. What we've seen since 2007, actually, you could never incent on a health risk factor anyway, right? That changed 2007, 2008, so that was 0 to 8. We see it increasing at a more rapid pace, particularly given how the health exchanges and the fork in the road will play into your risk tool and mechanism regarding wellness programs. Meaning, right now you spend X. If you start to look at those outcomes programs and use them as a way to move risk on and off the plan, we see those outcomes programs becoming a little bit more quote-unquote popular, right? So this is a shot of the landscape of the industry. There is so much noise. There are so many vendors. And when we look at the difference in what the claims are there really that dramatic of or is there really a dramatic difference between what they all say they can do for you, the plan sponsor, and for us as the objective consultants and advisors? If we look at whether it's the carrier or the TPA or the wellness vendor, right? So where did this come from? Let's step back and give some perspective on this, which it came, late 70s, early 80s. We proved that there were really 5 things that you did to be kind of healthy and not materially cost your health plan a lot of money, basically, within the wellness space, which is don't eat a ton or bad, exercise some, don't drink much, or if you do, keep it within reason. I think you hear what I'm saying. You wanted to have, it's not necessarily how much you weigh, but where you weigh, right? So the visceral adiposity, as they call it. That makes me sound smart. So thank you very much. I stole that from a physician backstage who you'll hear from later. And lastly, I think we mentioned physical activity. The question is, has that materially changed? Is that innovation? So back in the day, what did? We found a type 2 diabetic. What do the disease management vendors do? Let's put it in the pay stub. Let's mail it to their home. And by the way, let's call them nonstop at home to talk about this and talk about it. And they will change the game. But it didn't happen. So what really changed? Fast forward to today, what do these vendors do effectively? Reflect the health of your population back to the individual member, check. Efficiently deliver what it means to be healthy, but are they improving the population's health en masse? We hear from you, we hear constantly from clients as well as from prospects around the country that they are dissatisfied with the results. So we've got to be looking at the problem differently as it relates to not only where we've come from, but where we're going to go in the next few years. If I'm an investment banker, well, first, I'd probably be wearing a more expensive suit. That's number one. Number two, I would be looking at the problem within the investment sector and saying, this is a strong buy, these wellness companies. Why? Quantity of growth. They are going to explode. Legislatively, employers are looking to saying, I've got this removal of the unlimited lifetime max. My risk factors are getting worse. I need a wellness program. Meaning that this is an explosive quantity of growth, and the quality of growth is significant. Why? Because it's an annuity. Because it just keeps coming, right? You keep paying the $4, $8, you can stack it. It is a fantastic business model. Again, the question needs to be asked is, what does this industry look like, and how do you navigate the noise? And the claims. We always see these claims are correlative. Well, we caused this population to get healthy. Look at the ROI. We'll talk about that in just a minute. It is a highly fractured business, no dominant player, right? There is a significant growth, which we'll talk about in just a moment, of players in the industry. And it's difficult for not only them to articulate what makes them different, but for you to judge how do they fit into your plan. When we look at selecting a vendor in this space, we compare it to the selection of a vendor when you go to a consumer-driven health plan. Do you ever start that dialogue with your consultants and with your key stakeholders in your organization by saying, we want to move to a consumer-driven health plan, which HSA bank should we choose? No. You start with the goals and outline those clearly. So if we look at where the picture is today, you're roughly $1.8 billion with a B you spend. Through your dollars, you spend on essentially the administration of those programs. You've got a plus or minus 9 or 10% growth, which is exponential considering where the industry's come from over the next 4 to 5 years. That growth is coming from really the fear of the employer groups and the adaptation of these programs on a more mass scale. 7,500 wellness vendors in the United States. By the way, that's up from 5,000 just a few years ago. What is the determination? Number one, why are there so many? And number two, how do you determine the differences? How do we help you manage the risks within your plan, not only within the demand side, the supply side, but efficiently transferring those, given the fork in the road that you heard from Ed and Eric? As we approach the exchanges, what role will this play? We talk about the revenue growth. This is rate of change of revenue over the last, say, 8-10 years from 2002 going forward, as well as a forecasted look. So the money we're going to spend is going up dramatically. What is the measure? There are multiple types of denominators, meaning return. You can have a cultural return. If that's your goal, you design the program that way. If you have a financial program, how does it necessarily drive a return on this spend? Incidentally, we had our actuaries. We pulled some of the smartest actuaries around the country, not Eric Bloomberg, though. Let's just be clear on that. I'm sure I'm going to get in trouble for saying that. We looked at this problem. We said, what does this correlate to? Are we winning? Are plan sponsors winning? So we said, look at all the risk factors. And we said type 2 diabetes, interestingly, correlates exactly in growth to the wellness spend. Now, we're having our actuaries really look deeply at this because we don't want to make the claim that wellness spending actually causes type 2 diabetes. It does not. But that kind of typifies the frustration, does it not? Does it not reflect how we feel as plan sponsors and employers in this space is that we're throwing money at this problem? And one of the things that we decided is we need to be looking at the problem differently, objectively. Why? You're spending more money. You're not necessarily always getting the results you want. And so we said we've got to look at the problem from an academic perspective. We say we want to reduce healthcare costs. We say we want to address risk factors and attack them. How do we do that? Which are the risk factors we focus on? Do incentives work, right? And if so, how much? This is a very elastic curve, meaning the more I spend on incentives, the more difficult it is to measure that performance of the program. People tend to move differently with incentives and disincentives. So we created the academic partnerships that really are game changers for you, the employer, and the plan sponsor, because we want to look at first in the corridor clinically, scientifically, what are the things you need to be focusing on, and either move those risks or position yourself so that you're less financially exposed. How do we do that? We're going to be working with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Tim Church. He's an MD in preventive medicine, and if there is such a thing as a rock star in this business, he is it. Then on the economics side, the question that you have for us often is, what moves a population, incentives or disincentives? And if so, prove to us that those dollars work. So we've got a partnership with Arjun Laffer and more, and that's Laffer from the Laffer curve, by the way, which many of you remember. It's their firm. So let's take a few moments and meet these partners.